Just kidding.
Well, you found us for a second week. Uh, this is Jim Moy and the best head of hair in small business, Charlie Derador.
Hey, what's up?
Welcome to Small Biz, Big Ideas. This week we've got our very first guest. We
And we
have,
scored. We scored.
I mean, we went
We
big.
shot. We scored.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we went big. You know, some people bring you just run of the mill. That's not what we do. We
There's no
brought
run.
you the
There's no
man,
mill. No.
the myth, and dare we even say he's a legend, Denver Riggleman.
Oh my goodness, thank you. And thank you again for the fee that you're paying me to be here for the first. I really
Sure.
appreciate that. For the
Checks in the mail, baby. Checks in the
yeah.
mail. I'm sorry. Checks in the mail, Congressman. Checks in the
Yeah, no,
mail.
checks
There
in
you
the
go.
mail. Thank you. I've heard that before. No, it's great to be here, Jim, Charlie, man. Thank you for having me. I feel honored to be on your first show.
That's great.
Honored.
Uh, back to what we were talking about, the fee and whatnot. Years and years ago, I had a lobbyist tell me that he had told a member of the House of Delegates he didn't want to buy him. That the delegate had said, "You can't buy me. You know you can't buy me." He goes, "I don't want to buy you. I just want to rent you for a little while."
That's it. That's it. Yeah, that's right. That's what they think too, man. You know, they can lease a congressman with a couple well-placed maximum donations and a bit of a $5,000 donation to the leadership fund.
Exactly.
That's how they do it, buddy.
They
That's how
told
they
me
do
there's more coming.
That's how they do it. That's
But
how they do it.
tonight
That's
we're
how they
here to
try to
talk
catch.
about your experiences in small business, which are varied, vast, and ongoing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, where do you guys want to start? Do you want to start the first moment I thought I actually barely had the capacity, like I was above moron to start a small business? Or do you want to know where I'm at now? Where do you guys want to start?
What
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 is,
what
what?
what I would like to see is this, and I think our listeners and our viewers would like to see this as well. So many people know you as an author, as a politician, as um, a guy who stood against certain things and for certain things, but people don't know your root story. So if you wouldn't mind bringing us back to, say, where you're from, where you went to school, what your profession was before you decided to start your first small business, and then we can get into your first small business.
Ooh, okay. All right. So let's start at the very beginning. I was born in the tiny hamlet of Manassas, Virginia in 1970. No, I am a Truman asshole. St. Patrick's Day, 1970. I graduated from Stonewall Jackson High School. I was a Stonewall Jackson Raider. Graduated in 1988. That high school now has been renamed since then. In 1989, I got married at 19, Charlie and Jim. So I got married very, very young. Part of the reason is that my girlfriend's dad wouldn't let me stay there unless we got married, and I was living in a Chevette. So I figured I should get married, so I had a place to live. So I got married at 19. For 3 years, I just lifted weights, played a little football, and at 22, I joined the United States Air Force as an enlisted member, and found out I wasn't completely stupid. So I fortunately got number one out of my enlisted class. And by the age of 25, and the reason I said this, I had a captain named Captain Schwing. That was his real name, Jim and Charlie. Captain Schwing. We called him Schwinger. And he brought me into his office, and Schwinger goes, "You know, Riggleman, you're above moron. You should go to college." So they allowed me to put in a package to see if I could win a scholarship. So seven of us, it was 1995, I got a scholarship for outstanding airman to ROTC, SOAR. And my dad was an electrician at the University of Virginia at the time. I had to retake my SATs, Charlie and Jim. I had to do all that. And I got into the University of Virginia on the wait list to Princeton. And I picked Virginia, my home state. And I got in. And then I graduated number one in GPA of my class there. And I was allowed to pick what I wanted to do, and I wanted to be an intelligence officer. So I was an intelligence officer, and I went right into one of the busiest times for operations in war. 1999, I was on the Serbian-Romanian border for Operation Allied Force. 2000, I trained Omanis and F-16, and Air Operations Center processes. Also did multiple global training exercises around the world. Then I was one of the first to deploy for 9/11 with the B-1 bombers into Afghanistan 10 days after 9/11. And then in 2002, I was in the basement of NSA for Operation Iraqi Force doing signals. And then in 2003, I separated as a captain. So I went from an airman, no stripes, to a captain, and went into NSA special projects. At that time, for the next 4 years, I did crazy stuff, guys. Did special targeting with NSA satellites and American aircraft. And then in 2006, I was chosen to lead the Counter IED Operations Integration Center. And I tracked Soleimani, an Iranian resupply of IED parts into Iraq for 1 year. Then I started my first company, Charlie, 2007. Here we go. I noticed when I was in the counter IED cell that it was not efficient. I was only 37. I wasn't quite sure even how to do it, but all I knew is I thought that I could, and plus I had some special knowledge in supporting Air Force Special Operations. And 14 months, I almost went bankrupt, but I did start a company and finally got my first contract on February 28th. 2009 was my first contract start date. I actually started my company in 2007 to 2008 during the crash, but that was my first real motivation to start my first company, was to actually go after really bad people using new processes at the time, and I was able to pull it off. It was awful. I can go through all the challenges, but it was almost a complete disaster. But I got a little bit lucky and was able to pull off the first company. That's how I got started.
And thanks for that background. I've got two questions based off all of that. So you went to UVA as a
Well, I was a
as a E what?
I was an E4. I was about to test for E5, so I was a senior airman. So they sent me to ROTC. So I was inactive for 2 years as a
So
transfer
through
student.
ROTC, you came back a captain.
I
You
came
came
back
back a
as
lieutenant.
Yep, came back as a lieutenant and worked
Okay.
myself up to captain. And then NSA asked me if I would go and do certain things for them. So I left the Air Force and went into NSA as a contractor, supporting asymmetric operations.
Okay. And then the other question I have is, and then Jim, jump in, please. Is what the hell did you do for 2 years while you weren't making any money? Because that's
Well,
something we're hearing with guests that are to come. And from reading I've been doing, is that there are these people out there that are willing to do without anything for a year, 2 years. How did you
make it.
survive? Survive. Yeah.
We had bought, I had finally, as a contractor, when I started my company in 2007, I was making 169,000 a year. That was a lot of money in 2007. You know, I was a technical program manager. I had a little bit of a travel fund, Charlie and Jim. I could roll around, do some cool things. But I had started writing a book that time. If you guys remember, I don't know, Bigfoot, It's Complicated. I had gone on, Bigfoot expeditions to study Bigfoot believers. And a guy, and this is 2007. I had a few months of savings. After the first 3 months, I was having all these nibbles and bites, but it was the crash. I started the company at the worst possible time. So I went and visited my buddy in Connecticut. He was just a virulent Bigfoot believer. And so we're sitting there shooting his machine guns. He had full Tommy machine guns from the 1930s because he was insane. But he was also very, very wealthy and a good guy. So we're shooting machine guns. He goes, "What did you do?" I said, "Well, I'm trying to start my own company." And, I don't know if I'm going to make it, man. I burned through my savings. I took money out on a mortgage. I'm loading my credit cards up. I don't know if I'm going to make it. And he looks at me and goes, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, have this idea. Have an idea called Analyst Warehouse, where people can go in and pick their specific type of intelligence analyst, because I could never find a place to go where I said, I need a human specialist, I need a SIGINT specialist. What if I can build a sort of this clearinghouse for very specific types of analysts?" Because, man, that sounds like a cool idea. I said, "Yeah." He goes, "How much do you need?" I said, "Well, I know this sounds crazy, but I need to make it through the next 5 months with my monies that I have. I need $92,000. And he wrote me a check on the spot. So I gave him 10% of the company for $92,000. I said, "How about 10%?" He goes, "Cool." And so he went back, got a beer, and kept shooting freaking machine guns. So a Bigfoot believer got me started on my first company. And and I will never forget that. I actually paid him out a year later. I gave him a $250,000 check a year later. So to thank him for what he did a year after I started, actually, so right in 2010. And I still almost went broke. I mean, I know this sounds, I'm not going to try to over dramatize it, but it got to a point I was 2 months behind on our mortgage. We had no health care. I'm like, we're going to lose our house. I had signed a contract in December of 2008, and Christmas was the most sparse Christmas we ever had because they were supposed to start in December. And I remember by February, I'd been going back and forth and negotiating our cap rates. And I got a call from a PM said, it's going to start. It's going to start. Well, by that February 28th, I told Christine, I'm like, we're going to be 3 months behind on our mortgage on March 1st. We're going to lose our house. She goes, oh my God. I said, I know. So, true story. I got up at 0800 the next morning. This was February 28th, February 27th. I'm trying to remember the exact date. And he goes, I get a phone call at 0800 and it's Jim Griffey. God, I've never, and I'm like, he goes, Denver. I said, Jim. I said, buddy, I think it's too late. He goes, what do you mean it's too late? He goes, you're starting on the next business day. We got you in, buddy. And I'll never forget what my loaded rate was. My loaded rate for my first employee, which was me, was $136.54 with a 1.4 wrap rate. So you're talking, yes, that was my first ever rate. And a month and a half later, my business partner got on. His rate was $153.08. And you guys know I remember it because we were eating. So our first year we did $432,000 in gross between about March 1st and the end of the year between the two of us. And the next year we did 1.64 million. And then we were on our way. So that's how we got started. Was a Bigfoot believer. My wife, credit cards, terror, sleepless nights, and thinking I was the stupidest person in the world for trying to start a company and leaving $100 and almost $70,000 a year job in 2007, thinking I had some special juice. I've never been more humbled to that point in my life than I was those last 3 months trying to make it.
Wow.
What a story.
Yeah. So, humble beginnings. So, yeah. What's your current state today? What is your business portfolio look like today?
Did okay. I'm going to tell you guys some numbers. I'm always worried about this because people keep this stuff close hold, but I want to tell people what can happen. I had a great business partner. So for 4 years, we're crushing it. And we get up to 3.1 million a year. We got 12, 13 employees, whatever. It's second and a half, third year. And we're like, wow, we had about $1 million in cash in the bank. We were pretty good with money. And then we get this flow down this massive contract vehicle that could be $7 to $10 million over 2 years, which would you guys knows what that does for a small company. Now we're looking at, 10 to $15 million in AR. That's a different ball game from 3 million. We were working this sole source program called Big Safari, and I got a phone call just out of the blue, and this guy goes, "Hi, my name's Don." I'm like, "Oh, hi, my name's Denver." And he goes,
Don.
"Hi, Don." He goes, "I want to buy your company." I said, "Who are you?" He was the CEO of a big company called Endine, and they wanted to get into the sole source business for special acquisitions, some black ops stuff. And I said, "Okay." He goes, "I want to buy." I said, "Buddy, I'm not even big enough to do anything. Like I'm like a pimple on a hog's ass." I'm now I would say some people are like, God, you're doing $3 million, have cash to make. It's cool. It's a cool life, right? I was in 2012, I'm paying myself about 25,000 a month. You're living okay. I got cash in the bank. My car's being paid for by the company. I'm okay, right? I'm doing all right. And I was happy, more or less. And he goes, well, just let me fly you out. So he sends his private jet, picks me up. It's a true story. Jim, Charlie, I don't even know what to say here. And I get a 2.5. He said something. He goes, I'll give you a 2.5 multiplier on the company, give you operational control. So I said, okay. So $7 million later. So then, yeah. So CEO for 3 years, left. And then Pentagon called me in 20. Now, so why this was happening in 2012, I sold my company, took my wife to Scotland, and it was at that point I told her, "You've been following me around my whole life. I want to follow you now." And that's when we decided to start Silverback Distillery. So I invested 1.6 million into my wife, and I built Silverback out of nothing. Um, and we had no idea how to do it. We just made it up as we went along because she wanted to do it, and I really didn't care. I figured I could make more money at some point because it would probably go bankrupt. So anyway, but so we built Silverback, and then we've expanded to Pennsylvania since then. And then in 2015, while I'm fishing on the river, it was December 16th. I get a call from the Pentagon, and they asked me would I come back and be senior consultant for electronic warfare and countermeasures. So now I've sold a company. I have started Silverback Distillery. My wife is a master distiller and CEO, and I'm at the Pentagon, and I start my second company, right? And I call it Cyber Safari. I'm a single dude, just doing my thing. I'm pulling in about 40,000 a month, just having fun, running the distillery, and then I won this thing called the congressional election. So I called a buddy of mine up. He bought my company for 600,000, and I started my congressional thing. So it was my second company, little tiny thing. I started in a year, and I just signed a $1.5 million two-man contract, and I dumped it for 600,000 to the guys to give them a leg up. So because I was doing fine, and so then I sold my second company, and then I went into Congress, and then did that whole Congress thing. Got in a lot of trouble, as you both know, by fighting everybody who I thought was immoral and
Did you
unethical.
mean to say good trouble?
Yeah, I'm good trouble. I'm
Uh,
I'm damn good trouble. And then of course the January 6th committee called. I was on the January 6th committee senior technical advisor, and I saw all the weaknesses in their an open source analysis and how they combine that with sensitive data. And then I started my third company, which is Rig Technology, which is rocking and rolling today.
what does Rig do?
Ooh, what does Rig do? Well, it's very top secret. No. So, well, this is my fourth company, I guess, right, guys? There was Analyst
Yeah,
Warehouse, Cyber Safari,
fourth.
Silverback. Now it's Rig and Hoodle, Humans Out of the Loop. So we started trying to build a competitor to Palantir using telephony and graph neural networks, which really just is an easy way of saying tracking everybody with their data using whatever communications they have on their person, but also with anything they've left on the web, social media, and identity resolution databases. But I got a phone call from a health company, from a dental company. Actually, they called my chief technical officer and said, "Hey, can you guys build insurance verification and claim adjudication using artificial intelligence?" I'm like, "I don't know." I had raised, I don't know, 6 million at that point in seed and pre-seed, and well, about 4 or 5 million at the time. So I gave my CTO $500,000 and said, "Build it. Let's see if it's another vertical." I doubt it, but here's $500,000. Well, guys, we now have 12 dental offices about to test our freaking automation software. Um, and I'm just absolutely just ecstatic. I mean, you're talking about if you grab 10% of the dental market, you're talking 7 to 10 million a month. So in insurance verification fees. So we pivoted from actually doing risk intelligence to insurance verification, claim adjudication, health AI, insurtech. Then I got a phone call from a friend of mine who was a movie producer, and he met another guy who wanted to get into using AI to identify targets in standalone cameras. You know, the big security cameras.
Yeah.
So we just signed a $3.5 million contract to do the automation layers for that, and I signed a 750,000 to do automation for roofing for the same type of video management systems. And we just got another slug of money to build that same video management system into drones for surveillance and things like that. So there you go. So we are actually, I would say we have probably three main verticals. One's insurance and health technologies and AI, automation layers. The other one is video management systems for AI at the edge for identifying people, places, and things, utilizing backhaul for AI automation processes. And the other one is doing construction right now, starting with roofing, by utilizing literally our AI automation layers to improve everybody's CRMs by ingesting data streams that do estimates and predictive analysis on their construction jobs utilizing AI into one easy to read dashboard. So those are our three main verticals.
It's impressive. So, for the guy or gal who is, let's say, they're a government employee and they've got specialized knowledge, and they've looked at, hey, I can stay in the government another 10 years, and I kind of know what that's going to look like, or I can take that leap for myself.
Yeah.
What would you tell somebody who's kind of at that crossroads right now, right? Of,
Hmm.
I can stay and I kind of know what this is going to be, but I also feel like I got a lot of tread left on the tire, but I'm also scared to go do that. What would you say to them?
It's a great question because you would think that the first thing I would say is just go forth and prosper, you know, run through the woods, shoot everything that moves, so one of those things, right? The thing about it and what I learned, it's not really just about expertise. It's not about even just access and relationships. It's about the ability to not only accept, but to execute blunt force trauma. And what I mean by that, and what I've told people before, is what are you willing to do? How much energy are you willing to expend? What kind of pain are you willing to endure? Because when you start a small company, when you're writing your own contracts, doing your own things, if you're trying to bootstrap, you guys know there's a difference between bootstrapping and trying to, find investment into sort of a larger product company. The first thing you got, what do you want to do? Is it service? Is it product? Guys, when I started, I was like a pig looking at a wristwatch. I'm like, I can create this whole new thing. There's no new thing under the sun, right? The new thing is, are you willing to accept pain? And are you willing to prioritize relationships and access and do things that you never would before? For instance, I spontaneously flew to Houston to make sure I could lock down a drone contract. I am a former congressman. I am a CEO. I am successful. I have a lot of things going on. But I knew if I didn't fly to that CEO of a company that's 20 times larger than me and go there and sit down and say, here's what we're willing to do as a company, I wouldn't have got that contract. Doesn't matter. What are you willing to do? Now, if you think it's going to be something, and plus, and you two know this, the things that go wrong, you can't imagine. You can't
Oh,
even define the issues that are going to come up.
right.
You can't
Enumerate
even
them.
grasp, right?
Yeah.
Like the first time I got a call, that my contractor at the Department of Treasury, right, went to lunch with the Booz Allen program manager, a lady, and said something completely inappropriate. And I get a phone call saying this inappropriate thing, and we're going to lose a multi-million dollar contract because of it. And I had to take very awful, decisive actions. Things that come out of the blue on a day like that, right? Or that you have to figure out how to pay your people through factoring, or the payment instead of net 30, it's 30 days late. Now you're at net 60 and you don't have a line of credit that can cover your employees. All the stuff that you have to try to look is that if you want to start a company, know that you're going to take it in the face, right? And you have to absorb it. And if you don't have that, doesn't matter how smart you are, none of that matters. Now you could be well connected, you could be well heeled, you could be born with a silver spoon stuck up your backside. You're an outlier then. Great. But if you're me, if you're somebody who came up hard and you worked hard and you want to do anything and you only have you to rely on, it's about, are you willing to accept pain, and are you willing to deal pain when you need to? That means to be tough. And I had to learn that the hard way. To say that I all of a sudden walked in and I had some kind of special dispensation to know who was screwing me over and know who wasn't, know who's trying to take our IP. I got lucky a few times. I had people around me. And that's the last thing. You have to have some people around you that either did it before, can mentor you through it, or can pat you on your little head, like me when you go on a pity trip saying, I'm so good at this. Why can't I get this contract? I don't understand. That kind of stuff, right? And that's really, I think, the discriminator is really toughness. I think that's what I would tell somebody. And if you think you have that, go forth. But also understand you can fail. That is a possibility, but don't let your name be associated with failure. And I think that's the one thing that I learned from my mentor, a retired special operations colonel. He's from Louisiana. He goes, you know what, Riggleman? Just make sure that failure and Riggleman are not in the same sentence. And that, I think, is what I have probably taken with me in these journeys.
I've got two questions based on what you just said, and I'm going to do a callback as well. You said, Denver, that you could fail. Is it more to, in my world, bringing small businesses along as a landlord, as a developer? I expect failure, right? I expect somebody to fail. I'm doing everything I can to help them. I'm doing everything I can to prop them up. I'm doing everything I can to give them that cheer rally, baby. You got this. You got this. But at the same time, are you saying that that person should not prepare to fail, but know that it's a possibility, or that they should understand that it's a probability and I've got to follow up?
That's a great question. I think when you look at the percentages of small companies that make it, it's not a possibility, it's a probability. When you're looking at
Right.
probabilities and statistics. However, and it's so ridiculous what I'm about to say, but you know what I really thought when I started? And I know this is crazy, but I remember we were about done and it was that night before. And my wife, guys, I was a wreck. I thought I had gone through it all. And then I'm like, how did I get this far where I signed a contract and they still haven't executed the monies? And you guys know about that, right? They can appropriate the monies, but it might not be executed. If there's a government shutdown or there's an issue with the flow downs or the MIPR system, whatever. And I'm like, I can't believe it. I'm a failure. God. And my wife was like, will you shut the F up? You wimp. Like she got angry. She's like, you are a badass. Look what you've done. You got the, she goes, we'll make it. If we lose the house, you'll still get the contracts and we'll live in an apartment. We'll do whatever we got to do. But I believe in you, right? And I got to tell you what, I think it's that F that type of F that I'm not failing. And that was that there was a light switch. And I think that's the thing that is the again, yes, you could fail, but maybe you need to take that sort of foxtrot tango sort of look at things, right? That F that kind of look and say, I'm not that. Even when I got down and I was in my self-pity, I think it was snapping out and saying, I'm not that. I will continue to take this pain. I might lose my house. My car payment's 3 behind, but I know that contract's right there. I can rebuild. We're going to be okay. Are you going to be okay? Maybe not. There have been times we are not okay, right? But it's you almost have to be almost like, well, I'm still going to keep going. I'm not going to give up. And it's at that last second, and it's so cliche, but it was at the last second that I pulled out of the flat spin. It really was. And I think that just was the toughness of the time. But I had all but given up until I had that support structure around me that that's not you. And I think that's a really important thing.
The follow up to it is quite simple. You said earlier that you felt like the stupidest person in the world. They're your words, not mine. I have a question for a guy who topped out at UVA, who was granted dispensation by the Air Force to go pursue that degree, who has been through business, continues to go through business, and has been through politics, and still, um, face it, you're political. Um, do you have to be ADD to be successful?
I don't remember the question. No, I'm kidding. No, so
No, you just answered the question. But I find that people who are willing to say, as you said, F that, I'm going to make this work, are people who are willing to keep, not willing to, are able to keep 10 balls in the air with no problem while they're strained, while they're under stress, while they don't know what's going to happen next. But if you give them one thing to do, they look at you and say, where are the cookies?
I,
Would you
I
consider, I mean, this is a personal question, right?
um,
But in order to do what
probably,
you've done, do
you
you
know,
find yourself reaching for different ideas and different ideals and different concepts on a daily basis to keep yourself, I hate to use this word, entertained?
yes. I mean, I already have another idea for another company. And my wife's like, you are literally insane. Like, I'm like, well,
I get that a lot in my house.
yeah. And so, but I think part of it is you get into this problem fixer mode, where you think I can't fail, which is also almost tragically awful. You can't,
Dangerous
right?
is dangerous
It's
too.
dangerous, right? And so you have to be really careful about that. I think maybe so. I think listen, I probably would be diagnosed. I fight it all the time because right now, Charlie, not only do I have the businesses, right? I'm writing two books. I'm writing a screenplay, which is interesting. I do media. I'm never stopping. And I think part of it is I don't want to stop. I'm scared to stop. I'm terrified to stop because I think if I stop, I stop. But I think the other thing too, I think you're right about that. I think it's fear of going back to what I was. I think it's this terror of, when I was a E2, going through the commissary in Biloxi, Mississippi with food stamps. I think it's the terror of WIC. I think it's the terror of having a child on Medicaid. I think it's a terror of what you see your dad and your grandfather go through as government employees that got pushed out, with early retirement or cuts or whatnot, or not having any control, right? I think it's that terror. I think it's a combination. I would humbly submit maybe ADD and terror. And I think ADD combined with terror maybe equals drive. And I think maybe that's probably the best answer I have on why I do what I do.
Thanks.
I have so you're a former legislator, and back when you were in Congress, and albeit Congress is not close to the day to day of the HVAC guy, the person running a restaurant, but if you were still in Congress now, what do you think you could do to help a small business at the lowest levels, right? Knowing that obviously it's more sweeping stuff. It's not necessarily maybe
Yeah.
helping some individual guy.
I think it's right now, if you're looking at small business, you're looking at the committee structures. What could I do in Congress right now with the 435 and the way it's going right now? All you're looking at, just like when we wrote the PPP, you're looking at tax structures. You're looking at federal regulatory overreach, things like that. What I have found, and I'm going to be very blunt here, is I found that state and local regulatory overreach is worse than federal overreach. It's one of those things that I've just been stunned about. If you think about our distillery, my federal excise tax per bottle, 40 cents. Let's do a $10 bottle. $10 bottle, my federal excise tax would probably be 10 cents. On a $10 bottle, my state is $3.40. When you're looking at taxes, you're looking at business personal property taxes, you're looking at M&T taxes, you're looking at BPOL, right? You look at right. You're looking at these downstream effects where state and local don't understand how it actually interacts or how it deconflicts with federal regulatory issues. And that's the thing that I think I found most when I was in Congress, especially for your district. The issue is right now in Congress, it's so broken that even when you try to push something, the deals that you have to make sometimes go against the very district you're trying to support. And I think that's the problem that you have, is that you don't have a deconfliction strategy or people smart enough at the local and state level to realize that there's a compounding effect on what you're doing. For instance, TTB. TTB requires, right, under
Define
ATF,
that for our listeners,
Tax
please.
and Tariff Bureau, the guys who are in control of liquor under ATF,
Thank you.
alcohol, tobacco, and firearms.
I
Sorry,
hated to
guys.
interrupt, but people don't
No,
know
no,
what
no. Got
TTB
it.
is. So
Yep. So look up TTB and you'll see what I mean. TTB had a standing rule that you had to have specific types of cameras and lights for security in order to get your license, your distiller's license, which is called a distilled spirits plant's license. We're sitting here at the local place after we were called murderers for starting a distillery in a local council meeting. the things that you have to be tough about, right, guys? That when you get face shot, and they said we had to add downward facing lights on the corners because of the nighttime sky compliance. Well, that is directly contradictory to federal compliance laws. What do you do? So it's those kind of small things, right? That, and everybody's like, well, it's so much more. I just wanted to give a very simple example of contradictory things that you're fighting all the time as a small business owner that you can't even imagine, right? Can't even imagine. What do you mean the curbs we spent $30,000 are a quarter inch too tall and we have to rip them out? That kind of stuff, right? So that's what I'm telling people, right? Is that the hardest thing about small business today is you dealing with the unfathomable regulatory burden of conflicting regulations, not just regulations themselves. And I think that's the thing in Congress that I would want to do for the 5th district if I was still in the 5th. And what I tried to do, even in the PPP, I mean, the PPP was written so badly for small business taxes on the original bill. I actually went in with Kevin Brady from Texas. I'm a freshman congressman. I said, did anybody read this? You're going to kill my business. And I was right. They changed the law because of a freshman congressman, me knowing how business works. That's what you do, is you bust your ass for your specific constituency. It's not really happening, but it's also
Is this the
local and
first round of
state.
PPP we're talking about?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh,
First round of PPP. So, and that's why I think the questions are amazing you guys are asking. They're amazing because that is really the root of it. Is you have to have an advocate in Congress that realizes that the companies that are coming to you, they're not really talking about the federal regulatory burden. It's how your congressmen, if they actually go to work every day and work more than 3 or 4 hours a day, rather for dialing for dollars, if they have the wherewithal to pick up the frickin' phone instead of asking for money, calling their local and state legislators and say, what the hell are you doing? That's really what it comes down to, I think.
why is the state taxes? Why are the state taxes so much more? And I didn't use the word onerous. I was thinking about, but I wouldn't
They're
use that
owners.
word. Okay.
Well, if you think
Why are
about
they that way? I mean, you brought up a microcosmic example, right? Liquor.
yeah,
So why are they? What is the rationale for those taxes being higher
because we have
than
a
federal
state-run
tax?
anachronistic ABC that should be absolutely sold for parts, and that money should be used to wire all of Virginia, right? That's what it should be used for. But you have this anachronistic state-run. It's so funny. Republicans support the ABC here in Virginia, and it would make Mom Donnie blush, right? So, with ABC. But the issue is you have a very strong beer and wine lobbying group. They lobby to keep the taxes high on liquor, to keep the taxes low on themselves. So if you think about a 12-ounce beer with a applicable alcohol, it's about 2 cents in tax. 5 ounces of wine, about 7 cents. If you're looking at, one shot, say of 80 proof, for us, say it's at $4, it's about $1.30 in tax. That's the difference. And it's because their lobbyists are bigger than our lobbyists because they rent seek on a level I've never seen. And there's so much transactional graft that goes on if you have bigger lobbyists than we do. And I think it's that transactional graft as a business owner that you got to fight. We just got 6 ounces per day just now, July 1st. We get to start 6 ounces per day. We were only allowed to do 3 ounces per day, and my wife and I got that done. The 6 ounces per day came through, a group. I was really happy to see it, but they increased our actual regulatory burden. We should be, and beer and wine are unlimited. So I hate to go into this, but if I'm ever governor, ABC better watch out. And everybody else, they paid lip service. If you go back in time, I won't pay lip service. I get things done. And if I had my way, I'd sell ABC, take the few $1 billion and make sure every part of Virginia has freaking as much connectivity as they want. And
Okay,
so
you've
that's,
made a point here. You want to get rid of ABC. I've got two questions for you. One is ABC went from a board to a commission, if I'm not mistaken, correct?
yeah, it's a great,
They changed the form of it
yeah, when you're
about
failing,
four
you
or five.
change the words.
Okay, all right. You say you would sell it, but how would you then still regulate spirits, be they beer, wine, or liquor, in the state.
Yeah, I
You'd
would just
have to regulate it somehow.
Well, beer and wine are regulated. The best thing that you can do in this instance is just copy the free states. So you got 32 free states, you got 18 control states. The best idea for a control state is Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania actually allowed liquor to be sold outside of their state control boards, and they allowed unlimited sales and not taxing them with their state excise tax with a distribution fee through craft distilleries, which Pennsylvania's distillery has exploded. So what you do is you copy best practices from the other states that have done this. Best practices are usually Missouri, Michigan, California, things like that, right? Where they have a much more free craft specific type of sales structure where they're not part of the distribution taxes, right? So there's this thing, Charlie, called a profit transfer fee. So we're still paying distribution fees out of our own distillery, even though ABC never touches our actual bottles. That's the problem that you have. Plus, ABC sets your pricing right at 54% over your wholesale, which is one of the highest in the country. It's massive. Think about what I just told you. So for $14.40 wholesale, they're going to sell it for $29. They're skimming all that, right? Pennsylvania, 30%. So really it comes down to is the best practices of other states, which there are so many states that do better than Virginia. Take those best practices and make sure that regulatory structure is as minimal as it can be, right, for spirits. That regulatory structure is different in all 50 states. That's the problem, right? That is the issue. And that's why I think at this point, Virginia is so anachronistic. We have Kentucky with an $8 billion whiskey industry. We're probably at $500 million, maybe, and we have a better climate even than Kentucky. That the issue is policy, it's politicians, it's lobbying, and it's people not understanding how freedom of commerce should work. And that is beer and wine have the advantages, again, because they have bigger lobbies. So they want to keep that profit transfer fee on us because it's almost impossible for us to grow. So there's multiple combinations of that. And if I can sell it, all you do is privatize. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. There's already 340 stores. You make sure that you pick the top 3 bidders, make sure that they actually separate at the beginning and let it go. Wild West, baby. And as far as distribution is concerned, you're looking at the same thing that Michigan does. So that's what I would do probably, Charlie, is I would actually build a commission, look at best practices across all 50 states, mimic that, get rid of a state controlled board, go back to more freedom of commerce, and then utilize any of those capital profits that we get from selling ABC in the stores back into the economy, because we're now in more of a technical economy rather than, selling liquor. That's
Jim,
what
I have one more question for him, if you don't mind. It's like we've gotten to a place where it's gotten the intersection of government and business. I want to go back to something. I want to ask you a very pointed question. My name's Bob, and I have been working for Jim's Plumbing Service for 4 years.
for.
And I've
Okay.
had people calling me on the weekends, and I've been doing side jobs, and I'm using Jim's truck surreptitiously and Jim's tools to do these jobs on the
Okay.
weekends. But boy, I'm getting more and more phone calls. You're not a paid consultant, you're Bob's friend.
Okay.
Where does Bob go get the money? Yeah, you're not a government agent. You're not a congressman. You're another small business person. He's coming to for mentorship. Where
Mhm.
does Bob go get funding to buy 2 trucks and scale up and start his own plumbing business?
Where does he go get the money? It's a tough answer. I don't know
That's
his
why the
personal
question got asked.
Here's
Because
what I would
that's
do.
who we're talking to here.
Yeah, sure.
That's at least what
Mhm.
Jim and I have talked about this podcast is that's our audience. The person who wants to start a bakery, the person who wants to start
Mhm.
a plumbing company, the person who wants to start an HVAC company. I mean, Bob could be an HVAC guy using Jim's truck and equipment. But for the sake of this question, where would Bob go to get seed money? Because at your level, when you started out, yes, I could have been the stupidest person in the world. Your words, not mine. But you lived through 3 months of not making payments. You almost bankrupted your family. you had
Mhm.
a taproot of a wife saying, no, 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 it's all going to be fine. I believe in you. Bob doesn't have that. Bob's got an idea. Bob wants to start a plumbing company. Where does Bob go in your? I'm Bob, right? You're Denver.
Yeah.
You're
Hmm.
not a former congressperson. You're a guy I know from having a beer with.
The
Denver,
first thing
where do I go to get 40, $50,000 so I can get started?
I would have a three-pronged approach for him. The first thing I'd say is if he was Bob, I was, hey, Bob, what's your business plan? The first thing I would ask him, if I'm me right now, is what's your business plan? Show me what you got. Show me your customers, show me your charge rates, show me over that, and I'll try to mentor you through it. That's the first thing. Second thing I would do is say, Bob, what kind of trucks do you need? You need $40,000 to $50,000 in trucks. Can you get used trucks? Have you looked at auctions? The other thing too is how many jobs are you actually working? Because I'll tell you what I did, Bob. Right, Bob. When I was in the military, I worked an expediter schedule of 12-hour shifts, 3 on, 2 off, 2 on, 3 off. And on my off days, I was a mover for McAllister's. I also bounced at bars and I went to school full time for public college. That's the first. I said, it's awful, Bob. You know, you're a young man, Bob. I hope he's Charlie. I hope Bob is under 30. That's the first thing. Now, or under 40 and works out. The third thing, too, is when you're looking at any loans or grant types, it's very difficult. Here in Virginia, I think you do need to have a small business sort of loan line. But the other thing that right now, sadly, it's going to be very difficult for him to get a loan if he doesn't have any assets. That's the issue. It's going to be very, very difficult for him. If he does have friends, he's going to have to get his money from friends and family. He's going to have to go to friends that might have done a little better, show them their business plan, see if he can get investment. He's going to have to sell a big portion of his soul, right, for a dime, right? Because I'm going to go in there and say, how much is your company worth? You're doing about what, 70,000 a year? 140. You know what? I'll give you $10,000 for 10% of your company. Now, would I do that? Probably not if it's a friend. I'll give you $10,000 for 2% of your company. I'll give you 20 for 5, but you're going to do it. And he needs to have that one person who mentors him in getting investment, friends and family, working extra jobs, investing in coffee for caffeine, right? And also looking at all the grant and programs and actually stripping through all the state and federal programs he can for trades. That's how I would do it.
Okay. Jim, thanks for giving me a wide berth there.
No, no problem. So Denver, you have been more than generous with your time. So here's my final question for you. Now, you know that's a heck of a setup if I'm saying it that way.
Yeah, it must be. I don't know if Bob liked my answer, Charlie. Did Bob like my
Right,
answer?
right.
Or did Bob go run into
Bob's
the street?
confused. Bob's scared. Bob thinks
No,
he might be
no.
the stupidest person in the world.
Bob, no, Bob's looking for Denver's email address right now. He's like, shit, 5%. Okay, well, let's do it. All right. So from your perch, having been a small businessman, having been a
Yeah,
legislator, right now, you're
yeah.
the grand poobah of small business. And there are three things that you could just go fix right now to make it better for small businesses. What would those three things be?
Great question.
Mm, three
That's a
things.
great question.
Three things. Three things to fix for all small business,
All small
Jim.
businesses, regardless of the industry you work in.
That's a very hard question. I think the first thing I would do is looking at simplifying the tax structure across the board. I think we just did our taxes. Brutal. And the great thing about being on the Financial Services Committee in Congress is I had some insight that other people didn't, honestly. Uh,
I got this, honey. I wrote this.
the first thing I would do is I would bring back free tax preparation that the federal government got rid of. That'd be the first thing I'd do. I think what they did is absolutely destructive to small business. I think it's one of the worst decisions I've ever seen downstream. My taxes this year cost $18,000 for my businesses, right? That's what I paid. I paid $173,000 in taxes, right? So, and I'm just telling people this, that if we want to have a small business discussion, let's have a small business discussion. But the fact that they took away free tax preparation and that they allowed tax preparation lobbies, which is exactly what happened, to fleece America with this, those small things right there are absolutely destructive. So it is more than three things, because within that structure, right, as we have to take care of those who are getting started, I think there should be a startup business tax. If they're under a certain gross, if they can prove those business receipts, I don't think they should pay any federal tax at all, especially when it comes to trades. I think if you're going into trades right now, I think we have to give them a leg up on everything we can, because I think trades might be the most important thing. And I'll give you an example, and then I'm going to go to number two, data centers. Who do you need to build data centers? Electricians, plumbers, roofers, right? I talked to somebody a great guy named Scott out of Hershey, Pennsylvania. I was on an airplane, and he actually does the underfloor cabling for data centers. He has to pick up the computers as they're running, replace the cables, and then lay them down simply with these special jack stands for them, automated hydraulic jack stands. The computers are running, guys, while this guy's, you know how specialized that work is? And we were talking about, I said, well, how's it going? He goes, brother, he goes, I would be doing a lot better. The taxes are killing me. And I think that's what we talk about, the different state taxes. What is Pennsylvania's flat rate? 3.07%, guys, if I remember correctly, 5% in Virginia. It's really those no state taxes. The second thing I would do, and I know this is nuts, is you got to reevaluate business personal property taxes, and you'd have to reevaluate, and this is sort of number two, you'd have to reevaluate why we're paying M&T, B-Pol, business property tax, and personal property tax simultaneously. And I think those are some of the things.
When you say simultaneously, I'm sorry to interrupt. When you say simultaneously, are you advocating for breaking it into pay this tax at this time of the year, this tax at this time of the year, and this tax at the other time of the year?
Yeah, I think that's part of it. I think what I'm actually advocating for is that when you're looking at gross receipts tax, I think that's one of the most egregious taxes in the history of the United States. And I do think too that the millage on business personal property taxes is absolutely ridiculous. I think some of the things when you're a business owner, if you're looking at really trying to grow, you're forcing yourself in these bizarre positions, right? Where you're like, do I upgrade for depreciation on this equipment because I might want to do that as a write-off, but I really don't want to pay the business personal property tax. And by the way, do I want to put everything down for business personal property tax? Can I get away with it? Because I have $2.7 million in equipment. And then when you get some places with the machinery and tools tax, I tell you what, it's ludicrous. And I think we really do have we do have out of control local, state to federal government spending lines, and they think that they can tap small business owners on a level that you haven't seen, right? And I know that for a fact. My state, local, and federal taxes for Silverback are disastrous. I can't write off distribution fee or profit transfer fees. So at the end of every month, we write a check to the ABC for $20,000 to $40,000 just to stay in business, and I still got to pay fees. And I'm going to get to the third thing. Fee structures are ludicrous. Whether you're paying fees for a boiler inspection, which we have to do, or you're paying fees on top of massive tax loads, you can't get that back. And I think what you have is you have this stacked issue with small business owners where they're doing specific types of tax structures. They can't get their taxes done unless they're paying tens of thousands of dollars. And they have fee structures on top of tax structures, on fact of federal structures, and they can't even get help because you have lobbyists that are screwing them on the back end. I get so frustrated, right, that the only reason, and let's just be honest, if it wasn't for the military, if it wasn't me for the GI Bill, if it wasn't for any of that, guys, I don't know how I would have made it. It was because of government assistance. Let's be honest. Government assistance, being able to go in the military, get the GI Bill. Holy cow. Getting Medicaid. That's how I got through until I became a United States.
But aren't the taxes you're bitching about paying for all of those things that you're just mentioning you received?
I think when you're looking at those type of taxes, I got you.
The question's a valid question, Denver.
No, it's a valid question as long as the legislature is actually identifying and using those taxes for proper purposes. The last thing I want to see is a mattress tax, or the last thing I want to see when we're already at a 30 to 40% tax rate, that we're doing things that are frivolous. And I think that's what it comes down to, is the reason people are done is because they don't see any outcomes that benefit them at all for the taxes that they're actually paying. And I think that's how they feel. And I think they're correct. Yes, taxes pay for a certain specific portion of what you're supposed to do. But riddle me this. Why are there some states that are just raking in businesses with no state taxes, somehow are able to have a much better tax rate than Virginia, and they are blowing it up as far as their tax revenues because business is flocking to them? Lastly, we have 600 plus data centers here. And everybody's bitching about sales taxes instead that they want. Their property taxes, $1.5 billion. And I think what we're having this sort of this crushing blow from both sides where you almost have this disinformation campaign on certain taxes and other taxes are automatically rationalized just because they've been there forever. And I think, Charlie, that's the thing that I'm talking about. There needs to be some kind of commission on looking at how many taxes one person is paying on the same piece of equipment, the same piece of land, right? The same piece of apparatus. And I think that's the thing that really gets to me. And it also gets to me that the government taxes they're paying now won't even help them to prepare their taxes. I mean, what? It's almost mind-boggling to me that there is no coordination from federal, state to local on how they're actually stacking taxes and fees on small businesses trying to get started.
Well,
As you say that, I tell you, it
we were
makes
worried you wouldn't have an opinion.
it makes me think about how, a lot of times you will hear every politician, doesn't matter what party you're in, whatever, who will just say, we've got to help small business. We've got to bolster small business. And then if you were to kind of push them on it, they couldn't really tell you much, right? They would throw out buzzwords. Oh, lessen taxes on them, lessen regulatory burden. But the reality is it's complicated, right? And you need somebody who understands in the bowels of it all what that means. And I think you just hit on something big, and that is, hey, if I have a piece of equipment, this microphone, and I pay sales tax and 15 other taxes on that microphone, what am I accomplishing? What
That
and do I even understand that I'm taxing that microphone? Me and four other taxing authorities are taxing that microphone 15 times.
Well, 15 times, and poor Bob, Charlie, poor Bob, right? Poor Bob then has to pay $3,000 to a tax preparer to get his frickin' taxes done. And I'm just and I'm thinking, what are we doing? What are we doing at the federal level and at the state level, running around, right? What do our budget lines look like? What do they really look like? Every year our government says, "Oh, we balanced the budget and we have 173 billion in surplus." When they do that, they crow about that. People are like, "What? Revenues?" When they say we've upped our revenues, that is just Orwellian talk for we took more taxes. Great. I'm glad to hear it. But if you have a freaking surplus, what they're not telling you is they really don't have a surplus, as you guys, they're rolling over debt, right? But if they're out there saying there's a surplus, look, Jim's laughing. They're playing with the books. But if they're saying there's a surplus, why in the hell, right, are the local and state, why are the local counties, why they keep upping their personal property taxes where they're busting people up? What's going on? And what are they doing with the state taxes? How are they actually utilizing them? And do we need 300 people working in ABC? Are we, Doge was a disaster, but why aren't we realigning government with more efficient processes at the highest levels? Why am I still writing a hard check and having to put it in the Wells Fargo bank for the TTB and ABC to actually suck the money up? Are you kidding me? Why do we have people hard processing checks at government offices? It's a jobs program. And then you're like, well, yeah, but we have to have some government. Well, yeah, you do. But you got to have somebody who's tough enough to say, we can do this in an ethical way, right? To make sure that it's done specifically where people are still taken care of. It is possible to do two things at once if you have people willing to do it. So anyway, sorry, that was a little soapbox thing. I apologize.
No, it's fine. It's fine. Jim, do you want to wrap us up? We've hit just about an hour here.
Yeah, I mean, Denver, better than we could have ever anticipated, and we didn't even get all that deep into Bigfoot. So,
No, not yet. Or the breach. Or anything. Yeah. Look at the book I just bought, guys, to tell you why I continue. And Charlie goes, Deborah, are you ADD? Maybe. I'm reading. Our guys are going to London. We just got that patent for IBR for actually phone trees to use reconnaissance AI, proactive agents. Phil Winder's #1 in the world. I just bought reinforcement learning for AI for industrial applications for intelligence agents. So our guys are going to test. We might have the first patent for interactive voice response that automatically mines phone trees and can automatically use AI agents can actually navigate phone trees without humans training it, which means if they got to call an insurance company with a very complicated phone tree, the AI can do that. And if they try to change their phone tree using AI, which they do to stop you, our AI automatically counterattacks and remaps that phone tree in real time so that insurance companies can't play against patients and doctors. So I'm pretty excited about that. So that's what I'm reading right now. We're trying to help people, man. And I'm trying to use AI as a force for good, and it's been a lot of fun trying to do that. So that's what we're doing now, my friends.
wow.
How concerned are you about it, to wrap this up? I know we're wrapping up, but the popular discussion these days around a coffee shop is either AI is going to be great and it's going to do humanity a ton of good, or it's going to kill us all. That's the Bill Maher thing, right? I mean, robots are going to end up killing us.
Yeah, yeah. I
Is
think
there a
it's so
balance
overblown.
there to be struck?
Yeah, I mean, listen, AI, any technology. I mean, you got to remember, man, people were worried TVs were going to pollute the minds of kids, right? And Y2K almost took us all out, and there's always going to be sort of, I think, panic. I think we're in more of a disinformation propaganda world too, where there's an overreaction to certain things that aren't that big of a deal, but they can be blown up.
Ask Jimmy Kimmel.
No, no pun intended. Yeah, no, yeah, exactly. That's a good point. I do think that there are certainly dangers of unfettered AI access. And if you look at the federal government not allowing the states to regulate at their level, which I think is, again, one of the biggest issues, just an unconstitutional, ludicrous thing. The states should have the ability to regulate AI the way they want by their elected leaders at their local and state levels. But I do think it's the non regulation or it's the actual dominance of certain companies that can determine what the business spaces are that's a bigger threat than AI robots coming to your house. I think the bigger threat is actually dominating and destroying small AI and innovative companies because they don't have access to resources. That is incredibly dangerous. I think that is the biggest problem because then you're going to have massive, massive wealth divides as the big guys control the levers to new technologies, which is what you're seeing with Palantir, Anduril, and things of that nature. That's my fight. There are so many brilliant people out there, but if you're allowing the government to self-deal and to control those structures, if you want to talk about economic Armageddon, it's actually having complete control in the hands of a few companies rather than AI being some kind of force or technical force we can't control.
And to your point, if you do not have small businesses, you will kill innovation.
Done.
100% of the time, you will kill innovation. It is the innovative backbone of this country.
I agree.
In things I've done in my prior life, I was amazed at what hungry, because see, that's the difference, is when you're hungry, you make you to your point, you hustle and you make it happen, right? Other people may have the watches, but you got the time because literally this is it. It's existential for you. And if we do not do
It
more
is.
to bolster small businesses, and right, if it's in the hands of just a few, you kill it. You
You
kill
kill
what
it.
has made America America, which has always been about innovation. Always. Literally.
I changed this idiom. I always say to small business guys or people starting, I said, it's going to get worse before it gets worse, but then you win. There's, or that which doesn't kill you only postpones the inevitable, brother. So, I mean, it's all of that. And I really appreciate you guys. Thanks for giving me the opportunity to be
No,
your
thank you for
first
coming
guest
on.
and your second show. I appreciate you both very much.
No, thank you. And so to everyone, thank you very much for joining us for our second episode of Small Biz, Big Ideas. Thank you to the great, the estimable Denver Riggleman. And to
the
you all,
guy who
I
drinks
say,
whiskey.
be good, be better, be best. Thank you very much.
See you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.